Out of control smash and grabs in Christchurch. It's news that's become all too familiar across Canterbury, in fact. You'll know the recent story of the dairy owner in Sockburn who's been targeted 5 times, including an aggravated robbery. He's simply had enough, but he feels powerless to do anything. So what can police do? Or do they feel powerless as well when it comes to trying to stop this? Well, joining me now is the Police Association boss, Chris Cahill. Hello, G. Nice to see you, Chris.
Good afternoon.
First of all, you expecting any great changes in the crime stats with the new police minister?
Well, not really. I mean, I think we have to be realistic. A lot of what we're dealing with is intergenerational issues, the big things around the failure of our family unit, the family harm that occurs, the failure of the education system. I don't think she is going to be able to turn it around in a few short months.
Smash and grabs in Canterbury over the weekend, about 3 of them. Do police have enough resources to deal with this type of crime?
It's not always a resourcing issue. I mean, police will be able to attend the majority of these. I mean, sometimes they'll certainly be overwhelmed with demand. But the real challenge, I think, is who's doing the offences and how are they held to account. What we do hear from our members constantly is that the same offenders are caught. They simply go through the revolving door and they're back out the next night. And it's very few that are kept in custody, only the very top-end offenders. They feel frustrated that they have to deal with the same people again and again.
And I can see that frustration. I mean, talking to some of the officers, it's almost like, here we go again, it's the same ones. But conversely, you've also got the parents that I've spoken to across Christchurch, including the mother of a 10-year-old who said that she feels powerless to do anything. He just goes and runs out and does it again. And in fact, she tries to find out where he's got to by finding what latest crime he's committed. And she said to me she's just as frustrated as police, and she feels like she doesn't have the support from the likes of Oranga Tamariki. So as you say, it is a huge generational issue, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. To me, it starts right back at early education and flowing through to our education system. We've got to find a way to engage with these people or these youths in a manner that actually gets them interested in learning skills, doing things that they can actually then flow on eventually into employment. But it's hard if they're going home where there's no food or where there's family violence. I mean, it's hard to have sympathy when you see a kid out there with a hammer threatening a shop owner like that. And, I totally understand why you wouldn't have sympathy, but the chances are there's a backstory where someone's beaten and abused that kid from an early age. And that's the fact of life with the people we're dealing with.
Let's just briefly touch on that story, the incident in Sockburn where a youth offender armed with a hammer did approach that dairy owner. The dairy owner arrived after hearing the alarms going off. The teenager, by the looks of things, runs at him with a hammer. I mean, that's a concern, isn't it? The level of confidence some of these youth offenders appear to have now. Thankfully, the dairy owner wasn't attacked and the youth saw some kind of sense, but the confidence they appear to have now is serious, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, that video is very concerning. I mean, if that kid hadn't stopped, I don't think that shop owner could have got away. And then again, they almost tried to run him over with the car when they left. So they don't seem to understand there is consequences or repercussions when they do these things. And perhaps it is because there hasn't been consequences for previous offending. And that, again, is difficult. I mean, I'm not saying you should throw them in jail and lock up the key. We did that to a generation, and all it meant, we ended up with a lot of gang members and a proliferation of gang members. So this, I think, points to how difficult it is. But in saying that, you shouldn't be able to do that and not face some consequences.
Chris, this is just anecdotal evidence from my layman's point of view here, but to me it seems part of the problem is that these kids don't feel loved and they are craving attention. They want attention and they'll go to any extreme measures to attempt to get that.
Yeah, I think there's some real truth in that. I mean, As I said, a lot of these kids have backstories where they come from families that are dysfunctional, where they've been abused, and they really haven't seen anything that they can latch onto and say, this means something to me. The school system, the standard school system doesn't work for them, and that's where we're going to have to invest things, and Oranga Tamariki are going to have some support, got to work with some other non-government agencies, iwi, to put some things around that actually give these kids a sense of identity and a sense of worth. And a lot of your listeners or people that watch will say, oh, that's airy-fairy. But the reality is, if we don't do it, all we end up with is adult offenders.
Chris, there is plenty of footage, dare I say this, on TikTok of children driving stolen cars. When I say children, I mean, 13, 14-year-olds. They're laughing and filming police with their lights in the distance, their lights flashing in the distance. And obviously that's because police can only somewhat monitor them. They can't pursue these kids. How frustrating is that for the officers?
Yeah, look, it's very frustrating for frontline officers. And look, I've always said, I think the pursuit policy is probably one of the hardest to get the right mix on. I mean, at one level, if you do have these fleeing driver incidents, they can result in horrendous results. And Christchurch has seen more of those than their fair share with some pretty tragic circumstances. And our officers also get in a lot of trouble when it goes wrong. So on a selfish level, when there's no pursuits, our officers aren't getting in trouble. But clearly, it went too far. And in some ways, advertising that the policy had changed was the worst thing police did, because there's a perception that there can be no pursuit, and clearly it's led to a higher number of vehicles being stolen, more people not stopping, and to some degree these ram raids are a flow from it. So there needs to be a better mix there.
Where are we at with the police review of pursuits? Because I know it's going through a review process to see whether they need to be changed, because as you say, it looks like it went too far one way. What is the latest with that now, that review? Do we know?
Yeah, well, there has been a few iterations and we've had some input into those. I think, to be honest, it reflects how hard and how difficult it is to get that balance right. It still comes down, to be honest, the officer making a decision at the time with the best information they got, and there needs to be some understanding that that won't always be right because circumstances change. But we're hoping to see something finally from police within the next few weeks. We understand it's that close.
Chris, just finally, I got a statement from the Children's Commissioner, of course, a former judge, and she said, I put it to her, what's going on here? Why are we seeing so many ram raids? Why are we seeing so many smash and grabs? And she said, and I quote, families are struggling with the cost of living, the impact of COVID-19, and children not being at school all playing a part. I agree with that in part, but surely it's a bit more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, there's certainly multiple parts, and it's hard to understand why it's got so bad. I think you can throw the social media in there. Without a doubt, a lot of this youth offending is simply to outdo one another on TikTok and the like. And part of me says those social media, it sounds a bit simplistic, but those social media forums perhaps need to block a lot of this offending simply because it's encouraging it. But in the end, I think that the level of truancy we have in New Zealand now and the lack of engagement in the education system is leading to a hell of a lot of this, and that needs to improve.
Well, Chris, they've blocked TikTok from Parliament. Maybe they can block it from school kids too, maybe.
Yeah, it's a big step, but without a doubt that is driving a lot of it. They're just outdoing each other.